In the icy grip of a South American winter, the waters of the Rio de la Plata were so cold that they seemed to bite at the hulls of the 5 ships that entered its vast estuary. This wasn't just any expedition. It was a mission that would change the course of history. The man at the helm, Ferdinand Magellan, was not just a sailor. He was a man driven by a vision so grand that it bordered on obsession, his goal: to find a passage to the Pacific Ocean and claim the Spice Islands for Spain. But the journey was fraught with danger, and not just from the elements. The real threat came from within the fleet itself, from the very men he had chosen to lead. Magellan's Armada de Molucca set sail from Spain in 1519, a fleet of 5 ships carrying a crew of over 270 men. Among them were some of the most skilled sailors and navigators of the time, but also men who harbored deep resentment and suspicion. Magellan, a Portuguese explorer in the service of the Spanish crown, was an outsider. The Spanish noblemen who held royal commissions expected to be treated with respect and given a say in the expedition's direction. But Magellan was a man of secrets, and he kept his plans close to his chest. As the fleet sailed south along the coast of Brazil, the tensions between Magellan and his Spanish officers grew. Juan de Cartagena, the commander of the San Antonio, was the most vocal of the dissenters. He was a nobleman and intimate of the Bishop of Burgos, and some even whispered that he was the bishop's illegitimate son. Cartagena believed that he, not Magellan, should be in command. When he dared to question the admiral's course, Magellan's response was swift and brutal: "Follow me and don't ask questions." He barked, his voice cutting through the salty air. It was a clear challenge, and Cartagena rose to it, refusing to attend the nightly meetings and sending a quartermaster in his place. The quartermaster, in a bold move, addressed Magellan not as Capitan General, but simply as Capitan. Magellan, a man known for his iron will and ruthless discipline, saw this as an act of insubordination. He called a meeting of all the officers on the flagship, the Trinidad, and when Cartagena tried to question him again, the admiral snapped. "You are my prisoner," he declared, and ordered an alguacil or master-at-arms to take Cartagena into custody. It was a bold move, one that could have sparked a mutiny, but the other officers stood by, mute and powerless. Magellan had asserted his authority, but the seeds of rebellion had been sown. The fleet continued south, and on November 29, 1519, they sighted the coast of Brazil. 2 weeks later, they entered the Bay of Rio de Janeiro. The weather was warm, and the native women were friendly, much to the delight of the crew. But Magellan, ever focused on his mission, ordered them to move on. According to the maps and globes he had studied, the Rio de Solis, known today as the Rio de la Plata, lay 1,000 miles to the south. Magellan was convinced that this was the entrance to the strait he sought, the key to the Pacific and the Spice Islands. The journey to the Rio de la Plata was long and arduous. The ships hugged the coast, navigating through treacherous waters and enduring harsh conditions. Finally, on January 10, 1520, they reached the estuary. The men on deck cheered as they saw the vast expanse of water stretching out before them. They believed they had found the strait, the passage that would lead them to their ultimate goal. Magellan, however, was not so sure. He ordered the fleet to explore the estuary, but after several days of searching, it became clear that this was not the strait they were looking for. Disappointment and frustration set in. The crew was tired, and the tensions between Magellan and his officers were reaching a boiling point. The admiral's secrecy and his harsh treatment of Cartagena had not gone unnoticed. The men began to whisper among themselves, and the seeds of mutiny took root. Magellan, aware of the growing unrest, knew he had to act. He ordered the fleet to continue south, determined to find the strait he knew must be there. On March 31, 1520, the fleet entered a narrow passage that would later be named the Strait of Magellan. The discovery was a triumph, but the celebration was short-lived. The passage was treacherous, with strong currents and rocky shores. The journey through the strait took over a month, and the conditions were brutal. Food and fresh water were scarce, and the crew suffered from scurvy and other diseases. Morale was low, and the threat of mutiny loomed larger than ever. Magellan, ever the master of discipline, maintained his iron grip on the fleet. He punished those who showed signs of dissent, and his ruthless methods kept the crew in line. But the strain was taking its toll. On May 1, 1520, while the fleet was still navigating the strait, a full-scale mutiny broke out. The leaders were Cartagena, who had been released from captivity, and Gaspar de Quesada, the commander of the Concepcion. They demanded that Magellan abandon the expedition and return to Spain. Magellan, faced with this crisis, acted with characteristic decisiveness. He ordered the loyal ships to blockade the mutinous vessels and sent a small force to arrest the leaders. In a dramatic confrontation, Magellan himself led the assault on the Concepcion. The mutiny was quelled, but not without bloodshed. Quesada was executed, and Cartagena was marooned on a desolate island. The message was clear: any further acts of insubordination would be met with severe punishment. The fleet emerged from the strait on November 28, 1520, and entered the vast, uncharted waters of the Pacific Ocean. The journey ahead was unknown, and the crew was exhausted, but Magellan's determination never wavered. He led the fleet across the Pacific, enduring months of hardship and loss. The San Antonio, the ship commanded by Cartagena, had already deserted the fleet, and the Santiago had been lost in a storm. By the time they reached the Philippines in 1521, only 3 ships remained. In the Philippines, Magellan met his end. He was killed in a battle with local tribesmen, but his legacy lived on. The remaining ships, under the command of Juan Sebastián Elcano, continued the journey and eventually completed the first circumnavigation of the globe. The voyage of the Armada de Molucca was a triumph of human endurance and exploration, but it was also a story of leadership, discipline, and the dangers of mutiny. Magellan's journey was a testament to his vision and his unwavering commitment to his goal. Despite the challenges he faced, from the hostile Spanish officers to the treacherous waters of the strait, he never lost sight of his mission. His methods may have been harsh, but they were necessary to keep the expedition on course. The voyage of the Armada de Molucca was a defining moment in history, and Magellan's legacy continues to inspire explorers and dreamers to this day.